Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're doing a deep dive into something that, well, it affects pretty much every group we belong to. It doesn't matter if it's huge, like society or, a small church community. It's this tension, right? Between what's easy for me and what the group needs, the collective order. Our theme kind of wraps around this idea of always being together.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix of sources you've brought together for this one. We're looking at spiritual guidance from a sermon by Pastor Huzi Kang on why gathering is so vital in Scripture.
Yeah.
And then we're smashing that right up against a very modern, real-world story from Taiwan about law enforcement.
Exactly. And the link between them is, well, surprisingly sharp, I think. So our mission today is really to explore these two different but definitely connected sets of roles. You've got the spiritual need for interaction, for contributing to each other, and then boom, the civil need to just follow the rules, keep public order.
And the question that ties it all together is, like, what happens when what I want, maybe just worshiping comfy at home or, cracking a joke online, what happens when that desire crashes into what the community needs? That structure, that contribution, that clash, that's really where we're starting today.
Right. So let's start with that spiritual foundation. Pastor Huzi Kang, he focused heavily on Hebrews chapter 10, didn't he? Verses 24 and 25. What's the absolute core message there about community? The sort of non-negotiable part?
Well, the language is incredibly direct, really no mincing words. It says, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So it's explicit. Don't stop meeting up. It even calls it a habit some people fall into.
And what really jumped out from Pastor Hugh's analysis anyway was the focus. It's on contribution, isn't it? Not just receiving. We often go thinking, okay, what am I going to get today? But this passage seems to flip that. It's about what we're supposed to give.
That's exactly it. Stimulating love, good deeds, encouragement. It's active. You're there to do something for others. And Pastor Hugh pointed out something else quite significant about the Greek word used for gathering there, epsunagujo. It apparently only shows up one other time in the whole New Testament.
Oh, really? Where's that?
In 2 Thessalonians 2:1. And the context there is, well, pretty major. It's about the gathering related to the return of Christ.
Wow. Okay, so using that specific word, that really elevates the importance of regular church gathering, doesn't it? It links it to something huge, eschatological even?
Precisely. It frames it as more than just social club or, personal spiritual fuel. It ties meeting together directly to these core virtues, faith, hope, love, and gives it this really strong sort of end times motivation.
Okay, but wait. If the motive is that urgent, tied to the return of Christ, doesn't that put a kind of impossible pressure on just like the regular Sunday service? How did Pastor Hugh's materials square that? The big urgent call with the sometimes, let's be honest, kind of mundane reality of community?
That's a fair question. The way it seems to square it is by seeing the community as the place you practice those virtues. The lab, if you will. If you stop gathering, you stop practicing how to stimulate each other, how to encourage. So the urgency isn't about panic, it's about being prepared, being in shape spiritually.
Yeah.
But here's the problem, and this came up strongly, especially after COVID forced everyone online, right? A lot of people slipped into that habit of some. They got maybe a bit lukewarm, settled for online worship, or just drifted.
Yeah, you can definitely see the appeal. The convenience is undeniable. No commute, PJs are fine. But the analysis seems pretty clear that relying only on digital faith is, well, lacking something crucial. Why is that difference so big, according to the source?
It boils down to accountability. And maybe interruption's a better word. Pastor Hugh argued that when you hit a rough patch or you're maybe slightly off track, maybe even sin, an online stream can't really challenge you, it can't correct you. When you're just on your own, it's a closed loop. You control the input completely. Mute button, close tab, gone.
So the problem just kind of festers without anyone actually there in the room, someone you trust, to maybe gently call you out or offer a different perspective. You start thinking your way is the only way.
Exactly that. That lack of interaction, that real-time correction, lets people slide into what the source called self-righteousness, or this, kind of foolish idea that you can handle everything, especially spiritual stuff, all by yourself. The verdict in the source was pretty blunt, actually. It called the idea of a Christian managing their spiritual life solo dangerous and foolish, because it comes from pulling back from those necessary, sometimes uncomfortable interactions.
And to make that less abstract, there was a good analogy, wasn't there, about jobs that just can't be done remotely.
Yeah, think about doctors, for example. Remote work is great for many things, sure, But a doctor really listening to your breathing, your heart, doing complex diagnostics, they often need to be there. And surgery, I mean, obviously, right? You can't just have an AI do it remotely instead of a surgeon physically present, dealing with the realities of the body. That physical, interactive presence is vital in medicine. And the source argues, by analogy, it's just as vital for spiritual health and community health. Structure needs presence.
Okay, so the message seems to be, effective structures, whether they're medical, spiritual, or even civil, they demand actual presence and sticking to the rules. Let's see how that idea of structure plays out in the civil sphere now, with that Taiwan story. Quite dramatic.
Right, we're shifting gears completely here to public order, specifically during an emergency. This was around September 22nd. Typhoon Wagasa, super typhoon, bearing down on southern Taiwan.
And anyone who's lived through typhoon season knows that feeling. It's this weird mix, isn't it? Genuine worry about damage, but also, let's face it, that little flicker of hope for a day off, a typhoon day.
That cultural expectation is key here. It raises the stakes enormously. And this is where personal feeling just slammed right into the need for public order. You had a 15-year-old high school student in Tainan who decided to put out a fake announcement. Totally fabricated, made it look official, declaring work and classes were canceled.
Oof. And in a place like Tainan, getting that alert, it's not just news, it's a huge deal for safety, traffic, everything. I bet that went viral fast.
Instantly. The student apparently realized pretty quickly they'd messed up, apologized online. But the apology didn't really undo the chaos, did it? The damage to public trust, especially during a dangerous weather event, was done.
So how did the authorities handle it? The mayor of Tainan, Mayor Huang, his response is really the crux here, right? Balancing the kid's action with the law.
Exactly. He acknowledged the two sides of it, which is fascinating. He said you could understand the student's action poetically. Like, okay, it's a joke, maybe born from that common wish for a day off. Sentimentally, maybe understandable.
Okay, so emotionally, maybe you can kind of get it.
Yeah.
But legally, serially, legally, no wiggle room. It's very clear, not a minor issue. Why? Because it was spreading false information that directly messed with public order, traffic, and people's safety decisions during a serious event. The actual structure of civil society was intentionally undermined.
Right. You just can't let that slide because someone says, oops, just kidding. The system has to work, especially in an emergency.
Absolutely. The rule has to be upheld. Imagine if every time someone spread disruptive fake news, they could just say, oh, it's a joke, or I didn't know better. Society would just unravel, wouldn't it? So the stability of the law, the structure, has to override that individual poetic feeling or motive.
And the consequences reflected that seriousness, didn't they? It wasn't just a telling off. The source mentioned potential legal trouble for the student.
Yeah, potentially a very hefty fine, up to 300,000 TWD New Taiwan dollars.
Wow. What's that roughly in US dollars? Somewhere around $9,300 USD, which is huge, especially for a teenager. And also potentially up to 1 year in prison. So it really shows that structure, whether it's laid out in scripture or in the civil code, it has real teeth because it's essential for the group, for the collective good.
And that brings us right back around, connecting the dots for this deep dive. Whether we're talking spiritual community or just plain old civil society, both need that structure. They need adherence to the rules, the order, let's call it the law part. And that often has to take precedence over how someone feels individually or what's convenient, the poetic part or the pajama church part.
That's the core synthesis, yeah. The real danger seems to be when self-interest leads to isolation or, self-serving distraction. So we're kind of pushed to follow the spiritual rules God teaches, like meeting together, contributing it, just like we have to respect the civil laws that keep society running. Both systems basically demand we get over our personal preferences, sometimes for the sake of the bigger group.
Which leads us back to that actionable advice from Pastor Hugh's material. Something practical for you, the listener, in your daily life.
Yeah, the suggestion is to deliberately shift away from just thinking about what's in it for me or what's easiest and move towards mutual contribution. The key idea was to try seeing people in your church or even at work less like random colleagues and more like family members.
Family members. That changes the dynamic, doesn't it?
It's meant to. The idea is that family members, ideally, contribute proactively. They look out for each other. It's not just a transaction based on self-benefit. It aims for better interaction, maybe even better efficiency, because you're invested in the group's well-being.
So it's about actively being that positive, contributing part of the family, whether at church or work, understanding that just showing up, following the structure, it helps the whole group, not just your own comfort level.
Exactly. It's the difference between thinking, I'll watch the recording later if I feel like it, and actually being there, physically present, ready to maybe encourage someone, stimulate some good deeds, like the scripture says.
Okay, so given everything we've unpacked, the risks of going it alone, the absolute need for order over convenience sometimes, so we want to leave you with a final thought to chew on this week.
We've seen that being a contributing family member seems pretty vital, right? For stopping things from decaying, spiritually or socially. Just relying on digital ease or hiding behind "it was just a joke," that doesn't really cut it for maintaining these important structures.
So here's the challenge for you. Think about one specific, intentional, non-digital way you could step up this week. How could you better encourage someone or contribute more actively to a group you're part of? Could be work, could be your local community group, could be your faith community. But the key is, don't just send a text or an email. Physically show up, be present, actively contribute to that structure that keeps the whole thing from sliding into self-focus or, well, chaos. Something to think about.